if I can understand, maybe this is slightly a tangent here, but if I can understand, what is if I speak just about India, right? Like, what do you think is like at least according to you, what is the fundamental opposition to nuclear in terms of India? Uh, is it that the science? Is it that India does not have like the? Is it that India does not have like the relevant expertise to kind of build nuclear, and we don't know that, and we have to probably wait for talent to develop, etc. And we're not ready yet to kind of build nuclear power plants. Second, or is it that we know that everywhere where people or countries or nation states have built nuclear power plants, they are very expensive, and probably it is not the right solution for India. Is the like so that's what I'm trying to understand. Is the opposition fundamentally on a science perspective, like it is probably best not even to go there, even if the because the science itself is not sound for nuclear reactors? Or is it for a country like India, the cost really does not make sense? So like, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah. So great question. So first thing I would say is that there is opposition around the world. Okay, India is not an exception. All countries have demonstrated that there is opposition to nuclear power, and from the perspective of people, okay, if you happen to live in a community which is where a nuclear plant is going to be sited, what the community ought to be thinking is that there is a new, very hazardous facility that's going to be built near where we live. Okay. And the reason a nuclear plant is hazardous is because it's fundamentally a nuclear plant. The way to think about it is that it's a very complicated way to boil water. That's ultimately what it is, right? In a coal plant, you burn coal. The heat that is produced is changes the water into steam. The steam drives a turbine. It produces electricity. In a nuclear plant, it's the nuclear fission reaction, okay, which is producing the heat. The problem with the nuclear fission reaction is that it also produces a bunch of radioactive materials, so-called fission products, and the neutrons that are produced in it will convert some otherwise non-nuclear materials, non-radioactive materials, into radioactive materials. These are called activation products. And all of these materials are hazardous to human health. If you're near one of them, you can get a fatal dose of radiation. And so the whole purpose of trying to design a nuclear power plant is to make sure that this stuff doesn't escape out into the biosphere, or at least the probability of it escaping is very, very low. Okay. And that's the ultimate thing. But there are going to be occasions when there is possibly an accident and the stuff just get out. And when there is an accident, even though it's rare, if it happens, the primary impact is going to be on the local communities that live near that particular site of accident. So this is what happened in Chernobyl. This is what happened in Fukushima in Japan and various other places, right? So the radioactive fallout can go very far, but the bulk of the radioactive fallout is going to be in the regions near it. So in the case of Chernobyl, for example, there are still some. Chernobyl, the accident happened in 1986, and it's more than 40 years since that accident. This year was the 40th anniversary. And there are still areas near there where the radiation levels are so high that people cannot go back to their houses where they have lived for a very long time. They had to leave in 1986 and they can never go back, right? And so this is a real possibility, even if it is a low probability possibility. Okay. So in a rational world, or if somebody who's rational will look at this and say, do I really want to live with this risk? Right? I know it's a low risk, low probability risk, but do I really want to do this? And that's a question that many people will ask. And in some cases, we might say, in certain other risk areas that where we face risk, we might look at this trade-off and say it's worth taking that risk. So, for example, I know that when I get into an airplane, there is a slight risk that the plane can crash, right? But if I have to come from Vancouver to Bangalore, then if I decide not to take an aeroplane, my life would, I'm have to sort of write away 3 months of my life if I have to some other way, right? So I look at the convenience, the benefit that I get, and I say, okay, I'm willing to take this risk. Okay. But in the case of people who are living near these plants, there's a real question about, are they really going to benefit from this, right? The electricity, for the most part, in all of these cases, is going to flow to Bombay, to Bangalore, to Madras, and so on and so forth, right? So they are the people who are benefiting. These are the people who are facing the risk. right? And then there's also the concern about the radioactive waste and so on and so forth. And lastly, there's another set of completely different set of concerns which motivate people to be in opposition, and that has to do with the impact of the nuclear power plant on their local livelihoods. So, for example, any nuclear reactor, because it is producing electricity by producing heat first, all reactors, like all thermal plants, coal plants, natural gas plants, have to expel the extra heat. So, by the laws of thermodynamics, not all of the energy in the form of heat can be converted into electricity. Typically, about a third of the heat is converted into electricity. The rest of the two-thirds of the energy has to be taken out of the nuclear power plant, and they'll have to be fed into some water body. If you look in India, pretty much all of the nuclear reactors are on the coast, except for couple of them, which are Narora and Kaiga and so on and so forth. And in those cases, there is a river or something else, some large lake. So there has to be a large water body. If you are, let's say, a fisher person who is fishing in that particular in that ocean. In the case of Kudankulam, for example, it's the Bay of Bengal that is going to receive all this heat, and that heat is going to kill fish. Right, it is going to drive away the fish from that area. It's going to change patterns of fishing, so it affects the livelihood of those. The people whose land is taken away by the nuclear reactor, they are not going to be compensated with another piece of land. They're just going to be given some piece of money, and then what are they going to do with the money? It's not exactly the same as having land which can feed you in multiple ways, right? Especially if you're a family that's completely dependent on farming as your source of livelihood. So there are a number of other concerns that come in where people are opposing this. And so you have to think about both of these kinds of reasons. And it has nothing much to do with the state of nuclear technology or the knowledge of scientists.